What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the now 6th episode of the Zoomer Perspective. I'm Jackson.
And I'm Jacob, and we're moving right along, actually.
And we are moving right along to our first in-person episode.
If you're on YouTube.
Very excited for that.
Hello, we're actually in person. I can slap him.
Yeah. So that way Jacob can get my attention when I'm going on some sort of tangent.
Yeah, on a rant. Yeah. The only problem with this is we only have one angle. So if you are watching this, you'll notice when I cut. So, whatever.
Awkward.
I'm more focused on the podcast format versus the video.
And if you're listening, I'm sure you can hear the difference in audio quality because...
Yeah, hopefully it's better because we both have actual mics.
And Jacob tirelessly planning out how this audio is going to work for this episode.
Sleepless night.
Yes, tossing and turning. How will the podcast sound?
Yeah. And I'm happy with it. So
Yeah, from the little bit that I heard from us practicing, it sounded pretty good. So
yeah, for sure. So today we're we kind of teased last episode about what we're going to talk about today. And that was a lie because
we were just like,
changed
never
our
mind.
mind.
You're like, never mind.
Yeah.
A lie. Maybe it was just like bigger foreshadowing
Maybe.
for like episode to come.
Yeah. Maybe instead of talking about the past, we were talking about the future.
Or some, I don't know. Yeah.
Anyways, you want to get right into
so
our topic today?
Something Jacob and I were talking about just the other day was how a lot of the world has its own idea of wisdom and understanding, and then how, as Christians, that should look a lot differently, and where like that line's kind of been blurred. I think would be a good way to explain it.
You wouldn't think that there would be a difference in just wisdom and then wisdom as a Christian. But like if you don't have God as a figure in your life and you don't fear the consequences of God's wrath, then your wisdom is completely different. I don't really know how to describe it.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember exactly where it is in the Bible, but we were talking about this earlier. It's like the start of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. And if you look at a lot of people who would call themselves wise, but in a more worldly standard, like they're kind of just all over the place. And they don't have that foundation. As Christians, we acknowledge, okay, the Word, God is our foundation. And if you don't have that foundation, then you're just kind of like grasping at whatever you can to sort of ground yourself. And I think that's kind of like where a real big difference comes from with you.
Well, and definitely. And that's where like all of the anxiety and stuff comes in the world. Is from people that don't have, don't believe in God. And so they don't have any trust that no matter what happens, no matter how bad it gets, that they're taken care of because, this world is temporary.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's wisdom right there, isn't being able to know that God takes care of you.
For sure.
No matter what. I mean, it may not be the best life, just God doesn't guarantee that you're going to, live on a mansion on this earth, but in heaven he does. And so those of us that do have the fear in the Lord and believe in Jesus have that understanding that no matter what happens in this world, ultimately it doesn't matter because, or no matter how good our life is in this world, it ultimately doesn't matter because we have an eternity in heaven. And so that's where I feel like that's where some of those wisdoms come from, is knowing that this world is temporary, to where if you put a lot of, if you put your faith in the world, then your decisions, what would be considered a wise decision, is completely different. If you put it in God.
It's also like it's arbitrary, and when it comes to the standards of the world, like it's just kind of up in the air. And I think what you're getting at is there's a certainty when you put your faith in God.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to what I was saying with the foundation. Like, that you're grounded on something, and you're attached to it. You have, again, like that foundation of God. And so you don't have to worry about, it's like the parable of building your house on the sand. You don't have to worry about the sand shifting.
Yeah.
Just like, what would have been wise 100 years ago in the world standards is completely different today.
Yeah.
But a wise Christian 100 years ago, we could look at something they would have said and been like, okay, yeah, that rings true even to today.
I think coming after what you just said, we talked about what comes first, God or understanding. And you kind of had mentioned that, and can you kind of explain what you were thinking
Yeah.
a little bit more to me?
So the other day I was listening to this lady talk about how Christians are brought up, especially when you grow up in the church, how you're raised to love God and to follow God and frankly fear and respect God.
Yeah.
Before you're taught, okay, why this? What's
true.
the understanding of this?
I see where you're going.
And
I
the
understand.
guy who was reacting to the video, kind of, he started talking about it a certain way. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it got me thinking of, again, the verse, and I really am blanking on where it's from, but it's like the fear of the Lord is the start of wisdom. And it started making me just think about how if you don't have that foundation of God to start thinking about things, how are you going to be able to build an understanding? Because you can't begin to understand something if you have nothing to ground yourself off of or base that understanding off of. If you're just kind of like in this like abstract realm, just kind of grasping at whatever, trying to put things together, you're not going to be able to really have that wisdom and understanding like you could if you follow God and know, okay, I love God and I follow him, I respect him. And so because of that, why is this and like, why is this going on? Why do I need to do this? You can start having more understanding than if you're just kind of out in the abstract. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I kind of get what you're going with, but I'm gonna be honest. I slightly wasn't listening because I was trying to find that verse for you. But one that I came up with that I think kind of goes with what you're saying is Proverbs 15:33. The fear of the Lord is instruction and wisdom, and humility comes before honor.
Yeah.
Does that kind of fit with what you're saying?
Well, yeah,
or
and
not exactly what you were
that
wanting?
in the instruction part, I think, goes to what I was saying, where that instruction, you think of instruction as like that's the direction that you need to go. That's how you should orientate yourself. If you don't have any basis, if you have nowhere you're trying to start from,
True.
it's very just abstract. I mean, you can fall for just about anything. You can start believing really crazy things, and I think this is why, especially in our modern culture, why we see a lot of this. Some people call it like new age religion or like philosophy or whatever, but even just crazy beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the instruction part of it, that does make sense because it's like if you're using God as your instruction manual, that's a path to wisdom. And I mean, we should be using God as our instruction manual. I mean, like you said, all of these other religions and things they're not using the Bible as their instruction manual. They're not getting their stuff directly from the Bible. They're getting it from other books that somebody else created, and it was not inspired by God,
Yeah, and I think too, there's this one, I would say like influencer that I follow on YouTube, and he's in that like red pill, like manosphere sort of thing. And one thing I've noticed is he has no sort of basis for what he believes. He's not a Christian. He's kind of dabbles in like Islam and Christianity, which a lot of these influencers kind of do. And they're kind of like dabbling in it, but they don't really like firmly believe in anything. And so what I've noticed just from watching him over the years is like he kind of is just all over the place. And this is really where I got the belief that I was talking about earlier, where you're just kind of all over the place. You don't have something to ground yourself on. And it doesn't mean that you won't, realize, oh, I shouldn't have thought about something this way, or I believe this thing, but I realize, oh, that's actually kind of contrary to the Bible or Christianity. That can still happen, but this guy, he's all over the place doing all sorts of different things, and it kind of seems like he's a little bit lost. But I've noticed with Christians, like, you don't have that as much because you have that, again, that like origin point, that foundation of Christ to sort of like orientate yourself when you're trying to become wiser or even like smarter, like we were talking about
Yeah,
earlier.
and I was going to say, would you consider the guy you're talking about wise in any way or smart in any way?
I think he's super smart, and I don't think you can get to a really high level in anything with just by luck or just sort of like fumbling your way to it. Like, you have to be smart, you have to be really intentional, and I think this kind of leads us into another thing that we wanted to talk about is a lot of people in our culture, they're really smart. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of smart people. I mean, a lot of people are college educated now.
They're
here in the United States.
really smart.
Yeah.
But they're idiots.
Yes.
Yeah.
They lack that foundation, that origin point. So they're just all over the place. But because they're smart, like, I think this is where you start getting that, like, oh, I know better and I know what I'm doing because I'm smart. But it's like, dude, you're just kind of
That's what I was going to say. They don't have that. A lot of them, it's hard to have that humility because they are so smart that they can't even see someone else's perspective because it's just they can't comprehend that because in their minds they are so much smarter than most people that it's just natural for them to have that separation, to be higher.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was listening to something by I think it was a YouTube video by Ben Shapiro, and he was talking with some Christian, and it was really interesting because I was listening to Ben talk about Judaism and like why Christianity was wrong, and it wasn't coming from a place of humility, like, I know the truth, but I want you to sort of see the truth as well. It was just very prideful. I can't think of another way to describe it. So much pride.
Ben Shapiro being super prideful.
Yes, extremely prideful. And I think that goes back to what you're saying with, like, you're really smart, but because you're not grounding yourself as you should, there's a lot of pride and you're not humiliating yourself. No, that wouldn't be the right term. Humbling yourself. Yeah.
I feel like he doesn't. I mean, don't get me wrong. Great guy, has a lot of fantastic points.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But yeah, he does. He practiced Judaism and blatantly ignores what the Bible says. And
and not even like what the Bible says. This was what was really interesting to me. But just like this guy was talking about the facts of Jesus and giving out all this evidence. I was really impressed. Frankly, I was like, whoa, I didn't even know some of this stuff. And Ben was just like, yeah, I don't really care. And I was just like, that sums up so much stuff where, you could talk to someone who's really smart and they could be an atheist, for example, and you start talking to them about God. And I think I see this a lot. I was talking with some philosophy professor last semester. I was talking with him, and they start going down this rabbit hole of like, oh, if what's really good or evil, if there's no God, like, why does this or that matter? And it's like, yeah, but how do you know right or wrong if you don't even have the understanding of God? Like, it really kind of doesn't exist.
Well, they internally they have that conscious right or wrong. They have. I mean, God has given everyone that, and that's why there is nobody on this earth that has an excuse not to know the Lord, because he has given us all the internal ability to recognize him and his creations. Like, you look out at the world and you go, whoa, like, somebody had to have created that. And be like, that's one way where you can go look for God. But the other way is the internal, like, that's wrong. That's
yeah, we all know that killing people is wrong.
No.
And
murdering people is wrong.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
It's a very important distinction.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. we all know that murder is wrong. Every culture has taboos on that. And as a Christian, we can point to why. It's because, God commands us not to murder people.
Yeah.
But then for someone who's an atheist or even like what was the other one, like agnostic or something like that, these people where they don't have that foundation.
Oh, I see what you're saying. My bad.
They're kind of like, well, yeah, I know it's wrong, but can't really explain why. It's like this whole idea of evolutionary.
They just
explanation. I have no clue what it is. It's like, dude, no.
That's where they're smart, but they ignore wisdom because wisdom is to open yourself to see the truth, and they're too stuck in being right that they're afraid to be wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to what we were saying last episode with pride. It's very prideful. You talk to people who don't have a belief, especially in Christ and God, and like the amount of pride that it takes sometimes. It's kind of crazy. I'm like, shoot, I feel like I'm prideful sometimes, but dude, you're making me look
well. And going back
super
to
humble.
Ben Shapiro, I mean, the guy has a great outlook on most things. Most things, he is right. But the fact that, that person was talking to him and sharing those things with, and he just ignores it is really ironic to me because he argues with people about politics and gets mad at them for not being able to see the truth or whatever. And yet when it comes to Christianity, he does the same thing. He's too prideful.
Well, he literally wrote that book, Facts Don't Care About Your Feelings. And here's this Christian presenting all these facts. And he's like, well, I just don't, I think he said, like, I don't find it interesting. It's like,
it's not supposed to be interesting.
Hold up, bro. Like, didn't you write a book about facts don't care about your feelings, and here you are? Well,
your feelings.
I don't feel interested in that.
I don't feel interested. Yeah, facts don't care about your feelings. I mean that's a fact. I mean, it does not matter. A fact is a fact. It's just people are too prideful to. They can see all the evidence they want. But and they know in their mind, deep down in their mind or their hearts, they know it's right. Yeah. Because there's something that clicks.
That's why you have to be prideful, is because a lot of the time it like you have to kind of compensate for the fact that you're ignoring this stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's where pride comes in, and this goes back to last episode again with the more progressive Christians. You talk to them and they're, again, very prideful, and they start, bringing in more than just the Bible. They start talking about, you're upsetting me, or, it starts, you just
they want more.
It's just like, dude, what?
That goes back to kind of like facts don't care about your feelings. And a lot of people in church let their feelings and emotions in. Like, for instance, we enjoy the purest form of worship, which is a cappella, which is how the church used to do it, which is singing with your voices and not instruments. We don't use instruments. And a lot of people are like, I like it better with instruments. It makes me feel better. And I'm like, but that's not what's important. It doesn't matter.
That is true. Yes.
And it becomes so much of a debate. I mean, if your church is following the Bible to a T and you still have instruments, I mean, okay. But like, I think it's really, really hard to do instruments right. Just because of, it becomes too much of a performance and it's no longer worship. You're there for a show.
Yes.
And I think that's really, really hard to do. And that's why I personally choose to do it in the purest way. And the other reason I choose to do that is because it's a fact that that's how the church used to do it. And this is a new thing, doing these instruments and things. And that's a fact. But people bring their feelings into it and they're like, but I want this. I would rather this, or it makes me feel better, or this and this and this and this. And it's sad because when you get a congregation that takes a Wednesday night and works on singing new songs together or learning together. Like, a lot of people are like, well, I want instruments because people suck at singing. I'm like, then learn how to sing.
Yeah, just practice how to sing. it's really interesting that you're making this comment, because I was actually just talking with my friends the other night about this, and that's the fact that so many churches that have instruments, it turns into that kind of like rock concert, and that does invoke emotions. I mean, we're both musicians. We both like.
I
we
love
know
it.
music.
Don't get me wrong. I love
we know
instruments.
music
Yeah.
more than probably the average Joe. And so what kind of made me notice something was I was getting the same emotional response in a church with instruments as I would when I was like on stage performing a song. And mind you, like a secular song. It had nothing to do with church.
Yeah.
And I was getting that same emotional response. And that's when I was kind of like, wait a minute, this isn't like, oh man, this is the Holy Spirit. This is, oh man,
I
this
enjoy
music is
music.
really nice.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that emotion is bad. It just means it's an emotion.
Yeah.
But I was like, yeah, people are getting this wrong. But it's hard to notice that if you're not around music
Yeah.
as much.
Well-
and I think you also made a good point with like it's hard to do it right, because I do think
Well,
there is a
I
right
wanted-
way
yes.
to do it, because
I think you can can start out with a pure intention, adding it in. Be like, okay, our church struggles. We're a smaller congregation.
Yeah.
So let's add a little acoustic guitar or a piano to help
Yeah.
people stay on beat. Okay, let's do that. Okay, then let's add this and
Yeah.
let's add this and add this. So it's like, it's hard because it's, I choose to stick with the purest form and not
Yeah.
even push the line, if that makes sense.
yeah, that does.
And so I think you can start out pure, but then it's like, well, let's do this and do this and do this, and you just keep progressing. And then after long, you look back and you're no longer the church. You're no longer Church's Christ. You're no
Yeah.
or part of Christ's church. You're no longer part of the church that Jesus and God created when He came to this earth to create His church and leave. And that's. It's
Yeah,
just,
I think
yeah.
what you're getting at is something. I don't think it's in the Bible, but just that phrase of, what? Oh my, I'm blanking. It's like good intentions. No, the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions, and you look at so much of society, and there's good intentions. Again, going back to what we were talking about earlier with wisdom, like these people, they're trying to understand the world. They're trying to have, good insight on the world and how to navigate it. And that's a good intention. I would
Yeah.
almost say that's like a noble intention, but
it doesn't put God first. That's
yes,
the problem.
yeah, exactly. Again, with what you're saying, that instruction, that guidance,
Yeah.
that direction that you should orientate yourself. If you're just abstract right now, I'm in Calc 3 and we're learning about
Sorry.
yeah, thank you. But right now we're learning about I think it's like a vector, and so that's just like
Vector!
yeah, that's just like, it's not a line, but it's just like an object moving through space. And
Okay.
the way I've been kind of thinking about it is, again, with God, you have the origin, you know where that object is coming from and where it's going, but then this new age wisdom, this worldly wisdom, which the Bible talks a lot about how you don't want to be wise in the world. And it's because this worldly wisdom, it's like the vectors where there's no origin. It's just abstract and it's just going through randomly, and it's just kind of all over the place. And I think that's
Yeah.
kind of a way I've been
I
thinking
think
about it.
sometimes I feel like that I can be that way.
Yeah, it's
For
super.
sure.
It's so easy.
Absolutely.
It's so easy to do that. And again, to go back with what you were saying with the church, it's a good intentions, like you were saying. It's people aren't singing as well. An argument I hear a lot is like, well, David played instruments, and so it's like, well, we're being like David in the sense of, we're gonna be playing a piano or we're gonna have a guitar.
Yeah, but that
And
wasn't
again,
in Sunday morning worship.
That's true. That's
Don't get me wrong. I will do my own personal little worship and play my piano and maybe sing along with it and stuff like that. But that's not a Sunday morning. Our Sunday morning worship is this special thing that is set aside every week, and it is separate from outside of our Sunday morning worship. And that's what people forget a lot. If you like are at camp or whatever, and you guys want to like do some worship time around a campfire, have a little guitar, go for it.
My friend group and I, we've actually done that a couple of times.
It's really fun. Yes. I mean, I still prefer acapella, but that's because I love singing. I love acapella.
That's fair.
Some people would prefer it with the guitar, but that's fine. That's not your Sunday morning worship. It's your Sunday morning worship that is this more. It's a pure form of worship. I think is when you come together and you all sing with your hearts and look towards God and not towards the people playing on stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Because I kind of feel I don't want to feel like I'm rambling on, but I want to make sure that my point is understood.
No, and I really agree with what you're saying, and something I have really struggled to articulate for a while is the fact that, instruments aren't like sinful. Music isn't sinful, right? We don't believe that. But what I have noticed, and I think you're kind of articulating, is a lot of the churches that have these big instruments and this big worship,
they're missing the point.
Yeah, they're focusing on the music, just the music. They're not focusing on, I'm singing praises to God. They're focusing on the instruments, the people playing, and they lose sight. It's way easier to lose sight, because even I've done it, on why we're actually in church, why we're actually worshiping, when there's those instruments, when there's that kind of music, compared to, like you were saying, that a cappella singing where it's just the church singing praise. And I think this is another instance of this worldly wisdom and how it's kind of seeped into the church a little bit, because something I've really been thinking a lot about is a lot of like Protestantism is this sort of like, I'm going to judge what church I go to. I'm going to judge the church based off of my own understanding and my own kind of wisdom. And so, like you were saying, I don't like the instruments, or I don't like the way people are singing, so I'm going to go to a different church, or I'm going to go somewhere else. And then I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from, again, because now we're not basing it off of what the Bible teaches and basing it off of God. It's more just, okay, well, this is how I feel.
Exactly.
Or this is how I think, or this is what I understand, rather than what's the Bible say? What does the church teach? I had a quick camera issue.
Yes, only records 30 minutes.
But what you were saying, Jacob, about Christians, they feel a certain way about the church, or someone said something they didn't like, so I need to go to another church. I think, again, this is another worldly wisdom, leaning on your own understanding, because first off, we're humans and we're gonna sin.
Yes.
I mean, I remember there was one time when we were growing up, we were playing some game and you pushed me and I fell off like that wall outside of church. You know what I'm talking about?
I do.
That big jump. And I hurt my wrist or like my ankle or something. And I remember I was like really angry at you for pushing me off of that.
I mean, fair enough.
Yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Totally random story.
I'm not saying that's not true, because, probably is. So.
But I'm not going to act like, I wasn't upset about it. But I do remember like it happened.
But you weren't going to leave the church because of that.
And that's exactly what I'm getting to, is like, I think a lot of people, something happens where they just kind of like hurt their ankle. But it's like their feelings or something like that. And they're like, well, now I can't go to church with you anymore because you did something wrong to me. So it's like, I'm going to be super upset. I'm going to leave the church, instead of just being like, yeah, you did something wrong to me. I'm going to forgive you.
Exactly.
As we're called to as
That's
Christians.
What I'm going to say right there. Mm-hmm. If you choose to leave because of your feelings or because of what somebody did, you failed as a Christian. Because as a Christian, we are called to forgive.
Yes.
We're not called, we talked about this this morning at church, and it was really, really good. We're not called as Christians to forgive for the other person's benefits. We are called to forgive them so that God can forgive us.
Yes.
It's the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us of our trespasses, because we in turn forgive those who trespass against us. And it is very important that we forgive those so that way God can forgive us. Because if we can't forgive somebody, then God doesn't want to forgive.
Yeah.
You do understand what I'm saying?
I know
it's
exactly
in that is
what you're
that
saying,
we
yeah.
are called to forgive others, so that way we can also be forgiven for our shortcomings.
We're called to forgive people as like God will forgive us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but it's like, how can you get mad at somebody and, they did this and this and this, and yet you did that too, and you expect God to forgive you, so they should expect you to forgive them. They don't need to come ask for it. You just should forgive them. You don't need to tell them. You just yourself need to forgive them. That doesn't mean that you forget it. And like, if they were to like borrow something from you and they like stole it and broke it and were like, I don't really care, you'd be like, I'm not gonna be friends with you. No, you can forgive them, and just you learn from that and be like, no, last time you borrowed something, you like had no care for it whatsoever. I'm sorry. I'm not going to, you lost that. That's an we talked about this at a different podcast, but that's an earthly consequence that comes with that sin. I forgive you for that sin, and I will still be your friend for it. But your earthly consequence is I will no longer,
I'm not going to let you borrow something.
Give you something, because I know you're not going to be good. I will no longer let you borrow something. Now, if you are in need of something, I may give it to you, knowing that I will not get it in return. That's different.
But yes.
But,
yeah.
but the point
I would
trying
agree
to make.
with you, and I think people think that you go to church and like just normal human relationships aren't going to happen at church. I would think, you date somebody in church and it doesn't really work out. And then it's like, oh, I need to go to a different church because my ex is there. It's like, wait a minute, what?
No,
That's kind of weird. Or like two people are friends at church.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of like a falling out. Oh, well, they go to church. I don't want to see them, so I'm going to go to a different church. It's like, wait a minute, what? Like, what's going on here? That's just, it's just not right.
You hit on something, because I'm sure people have done that a lot. They date somebody at church and they are no longer, they end up not dating each other. If you were dating for the right purpose, it would be like, look, this is hard, but I would rather us be friends. Like, we are really good friends, but I just cannot see us getting married someday. That's just not, we just don't fit in that way. And I'm really sorry if that like hurts you in any way. I hope that you can come to forgive me, but like, it's not going to work out. And they can both understand and be like, okay, this person, it doesn't work. Then you go your separate ways. You go to church, you still talk. Hi. It's going to be awkward. Okay. That's fine. You don't have to go talk to them. I mean, it's going to be awkward. I mean, that is what it is. But you may fall back and, mature and then realize that it does actually fit. You never know.
And I think what you're touching on, like, it takes wisdom to understand that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, if I were to just lean on my own understanding and what I personally want, which I think a lot of people do, then I would just go to a different church. Yeah. I just would think, okay, well, my needs in my own, like my desire to feel good, to feel a certain way, that's more important than my spiritual needs or worshiping God and being in church. And I also would think that's just why the rise of like these churches where it's very lukewarm and there's these big grand worships like what we were talking about earlier. Yeah. My friends and I, we call it like the laser light show worship. I think that's why this is so popular, is because people aren't looking for that wisdom from God, that understanding that God gives us, and instead
they're looking for that pride.
Their own feelings. Yes.
They're looking for the pride to be like, I go to church and my church has this many people and this and this and this. That's not what it's about.
Or my church, this is something that drives me crazy. Well, my church does this for the kids or that for the kids, and we have this event and that event. And it's like, wait a second, but church is just about coming together and worshiping God. Like this might be kind of a hot take, but
Yes and no.
it's not about the kind of Bible study programs that they have, or what kind of kids service things they have, or the trips that the church
No.
goes on to. That's not
Those-
what's important.
No, it's not important. There's nothing wrong with those
Right.
if they're done for the right reason. But like you said, it's not important. That's
Yeah.
focusing on
It's
how
kind of
people
putting
feel.
it's putting the cart before the horse, where
Yeah.
you're putting all these other secondary things before
yeah.
church, before the coming together and worshiping God, which is like that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
We're supposed to come together and worship God and break bread together. And then, yes, it's nice to then meet up on like a Thursday evening, have Bible study, and, have a Wednesday night class with, all your kids' friends, and have a bunch of children your kids can interact with. But if you put that first, it's not surprising when then the service is kind of lacking, and when things start to get lukewarm because they're prioritizing the wrong thing again, because
Yeah.
not having that foundation of God.
Yeah. Well, and those same churches are focused on, they think they are doing the right ministry because they're so focused on their live streams to outreach to people. They're like,
Yeah.
this may be the only contact with God this person has. I'm like, I see what you're saying, but that's not what church is about.
I've always thought that was crazy.
That's not
It's-
what church is.
it's
I'm
ridiculous.
sorry. If that is your only way to get in contact with people, you're failing.
Yeah,
You need to
go outside. Like, just
you
go
need
outside.
to go door knocking. Go do something. Live streaming isn't, because they focus too much on that versus what is going on in the Sunday morning worship is about coming together as a congregation and fellowshipping together and worshiping
Yes.
together, and to learn a little bit and have discussions together about the word and to learn something. But it's ultimately about coming together, breaking bread in remembrance of the sacrifice that Jesus gave for us, and that we are forgiven when we fall short, and to worship with our brothers and sisters in Christ, and to bring people into that. Live streaming it isn't bringing somebody into that. You can't be a part of something
You're
if
like
you're
viewing
watching
it from the outside.
Yeah, that's
almost.
not. In my opinion, it's worse when you do have an inviting live stream, because then it invites people to stay at home
would
and to
agree.
watch it and enjoy it from home.
The amount of Christians I've talked to who are like, "Oh, I'm just going to watch my church online," and
it's not your church.
I noticed this when
it's not your church if you're watching it online.
I noticed this when I went out to school, and I had some friends. The church I go to at school, it's super small, and so I make sure to invite a bunch of people, so it's not just my sister and I going to church. And some people, they'll just be like, "Oh, well, I'm just going to watch church online this Sunday," and I'm like, it's just so silly to me.
I don't
And
get it.
To go back to what we're talking about with wisdom, like, that's putting your own feelings of, it is a little awkward to go and meet people for the first time and go to a church you haven't been to before and build that
Dude,
community.
No, it's awesome.
Well,
Every time we
sometimes
travel,
it's a little,
yeah, okay, it
like,
can
there's
be. No,
maybe
true.
awkward was the wrong term, but there's like friction in that.
Yes,
It's
it can be,
difficult.
but like when we travel,
Mm-hmm.
we try to go find the church the nearest church
Yeah.
that we think follows the Bible as close as they can. And it is so much fun to go visit these people. It's not our church, like our congregation, but we are still getting to go and fellowship with like-minded people that are worshiping Jesus, and we get to go join in person with these people instead of watching our live stream at home. From the church, we can go
That's
in
fair,
and get
yeah.
to know more brothers and sisters in Christ, and extend our knowledge and like our church family, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Like,
I think that's
it's
in
so
all honesty,
much
that's probably
fun.
like an even like that's a better way to look at it. And I would agree with you. And to tie this back into wisdom, like it takes wisdom, and you have to have God as your foundation to approach church like that.
Yeah, well, and
But
you have to
when
put
you
them
just-
first.
yes,
Yeah, like your
and when
foundation.
you-
Yeah.
Again, are leaning on yourself and your own feelings. I think that's when you start having these ideas of, oh, we want to do this like crazy outreach just through live streams for people.
Yeah.
And
Which there's nothing wrong. Let me clarify. There's nothing wrong with having a live stream. Don't get me wrong. That's okay. Have a live stream, great. Especially for like when someone in your congregation is sick and they don't
Yes.
want to miss out on the
That's what I
class
was
because
thinking
we're
about.
going over like a topic or whatever. Or if it is somebody new and they want to click on a live stream that day and be like, okay. And then they always invite them to come join
Yeah.
them in church and stuff. But if you're sitting there just watching a live stream, go get involved with that congregation. You cannot call it your congregation if you're not physically involved with them. You can't just do it
that's
all
fair.
over
That's fair,
online. It's just, it doesn't work.
and I think
It's technology cope.
it is technology cope,
It
and
is.
it's worldly wisdom to think that you can have
It's false wisdom.
the church community only online. I think you can have a community online, but when it comes to church,
But it's not a
There's
true
something-
community.
yeah, I think yes, I would kind of agree with that, because if I was on like an online community, I would still want to go and meet with them in person.
Absolutely. Like
So,
I have
yeah,
plenty of friends that we all play games with, and one of them we tried to convince him to come to Mitch's wedding.
Yeah.
And but like one of these days we all want to meet up, and so we do have that little bit of a community, but it's not that close niche community. Like I would never like call him up on Discord and have a sit down and chat with him about deep dark conversations.
Yeah.
But like a friend that I can meet up with in person, like I'd call you up and be like, yo, I need someone to talk to. Can we meet up, have coffee, whatever it is. And we can meet up and do that because we have that relationship.
That's
So
actually
you can
yeah.
have that online community, but there has to be some sort of in-person connection.
Yeah.
Like if you've never met them, it's really, really difficult in my opinion.
All right. I wouldn't disagree with you. And I think these issues that we're noticing can all be tied back to this like worldly wisdom, because it's very popular culturally to do a lot of these things online and to prioritize your feelings over what would objectively be good. It's objectively better to go to church than to just watch it online. It's objectively better to have fellowship with other Christians instead of just sitting on your computer watching church.
Yeah. It's just sad.
Yeah, I would.
There's no community, and you need that. But that's where emotion or feelings come into it, because like if you're sitting at home and you're watching church, like if you're getting offended by what we're saying, and it's probably because you're a homebody. You're not a social person, and you don't want to put yourself in the scenario with people. It makes you feel awkward. I'm sorry, but as a Christian, it's not supposed to be comfortable. I mean,
Yeah, a lot of Christianity. Yeah, I think that's true. Like a lot of Christianity, you kind of have to embrace those difficult moments. I mean, I just think about like if I noticed you were sinning in some way and I had to call you out.
That's uncomfortable
vice
for you
versa.
and for me. But it's what you're
either
called
way,
to do.
Where either if you're receiving it or you're giving it, both are uncomfortable. but
Absolutely.
it helps us grow in our faith.
There's wisdom in accepting that.
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
You cannot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It really does come down to feelings. I mean, if you let feelings dictate what you do, especially when it comes to God and how you follow Him, if you let wisdom or if you let feelings interrupt that, then you're shortcoming yourself. Like you're shortchanging yourself. You're not getting the full experience if you're not allowing yourself to go meet new people because it's uncomfortable for you to meet new people.
And what does the Bible say about trusting your feelings? Right? It talks about how the heart is the root of evil. And there's some other verses about like how your emotions, they can't be trusted. And it is a very worldly thing to believe that you should rely and trust on your feelings.
Yeah.
I think it would be wise to think about your feelings and acknowledge your feelings and your
Yes,
emotions.
absolutely. It is
shouldn't,
unwise to ignore them.
Yeah, you shouldn't be like these Stoics where it's like, oh, emotions and feelings, they don't matter. No, you should, think about them and acknowledge them, but then
Don't let
acting
them
on them.
dictate your life.
Yes, and letting your emotions be the direction in your life instead of God.
Yeah.
Again, this goes back to you're leaning on yourself and your own understanding, your own feelings rather than God.
Yeah. And that's just like where there's wisdom and bringing your problems to God. I mean, like if you are an emotional person and you stress out about things, that's where putting God first, and you take your problems to God in prayer and you truly give it up to him and be like, take a breath and walk away and be like, I know that no matter what happens, God's got this.
Yeah.
He'll guide me where I need to go. He'll take care of me and what I need. It may not be how I want it, but he will take care of me and let his will be done.
Right.
Then you can get rid of that burden that your emotions are causing because you give it away to God. Give God your burden and trust him to do that. But you have to have the wisdom to do that and to trust him and to truly give it away to him. You can't just say, hey, take this away, and you still worry about it. You have to give.
Or you still try to like figure it out yourself instead of letting God guide you through it.
Absolutely.
I would agree with that. And I think that you really hit it with just like relying on God. And that goes back to the first thing we were talking about with how trusting in God, fearing the Lord, putting your faith in him, how that leads to your understanding, how that is your foundation.
Yeah.
And without that, you're just all over the place.
I wanted to touch on fearing God because I think, especially if there's anyone listening that isn't really, isn't a CFCer, a lot of people don't understand fearing the Lord because a lot of what the progressive churches teach is love, 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 love.
Yes.
And they forget to teach the wrath of God. And so what we mean when we're talking about fearing God is fearing his consequences. And fearing
not just fear like actual like trembling fear.
Yeah.
But fear is also respect.
Yes.
You're respecting God. People I think you're absolutely right with just like the love. No, you also need to respect the Lord. And that also means fearing the Lord. You respect him. You respect his authority.
You respect his name.
Mm-hmm, you understand like the wrath that he could have.
Yes.
And because of that, you fear the Lord. That's what that means.
If you have no fear in it and no fear in disappointing or failing God, then you can kind of do what you want because all you know is that God is love and that you have no respect for him and his authority.
Yeah, that's true.
Then what's the point in following his authority if no matter if you just think that he's just going to forgive you for everything without you actually repenting or trying to follow his way. Like you have to try. You can't just say, Lord, I believe you and I know you're going to forgive me every time I sin. It's like, no, that doesn't work. You have to do the whole thing. You have to know when you fall short. You have to repent, whether it be going to that person and being like, look, I sinned against you. I did this. I'm sorry for that. I hope that you can forgive me. And that's one way of repenting, or simply bring it up to God and just be like, Lord, I have done this. I have sinned in this way. I acknowledge that. I am going to work on being better and not falling short in this particular way. Thank you for your forgiveness. Because at that point you are trying to do better and you acknowledge that it is wrong, and God does forgive you because we are born again Christian.
I heard something, it was like some TikTok was like, where do people think like you can just, no, I think it was like some woman, she was complaining about men and she was like, where did like men get the idea that they can like apologize for something and then do it again? And someone was like, oh, Christianity is the reason for that. And I was like, what the heck are you guys on right now? And it's like, yes, God forgives us of our sins, and
yes, we're gonna fall short again.
but it doesn't mean like it's just a free pass to do whatever we
but
want. And
yeah,
live
if you
however
have in
we
your
want.
head that it doesn't matter what I do because God's going to forgive me, then you don't, in your heart, you truly don't believe or follow the Lord.
You don't love the Lord, and you don't fear Him. Frankly, fear.
Yeah, and that's not
fear
respect.
It doesn't actually mean like, again, it doesn't mean like trembling and being afraid of the Lord. It ties in that respect and love and acknowledging His authority, and following that.
Yeah. And a second ago, I said, and respecting His name, because every time I hear somebody say, Daddy God,
Yeah,
I want to slap them.
I heard one time.
There is no respect in that one.
No, none
At all.
Not an ounce
Whatsoever.
One time I went to an FCA thing during high school, and the girl that was leading it, which is like the first red flag, she went up there and she was like, I think she was like, "Hey God," or like said something like that. Just no reverence, no respect. And I was sitting there like, what the heck? But I've seen it even worse where people refer to God as like, or no, they don't refer to God. They refer to Jesus as like bro.
They
or
bring
like
Him
my
down
friend.
to our level and
Yeah.
don't respect that He is God.
Like literally created the whole
Like there's no
universe.
awe in it when you
Yes.
do that.
He's the judge of us. Like, no respect,
Yeah.
no reverence. I think that's another huge issue, and another very worldly thing is just a complete and utter lack of reverence towards God. And because it's like, I don't feel like being quiet, or I don't like the quiet, or it feels weird. It's like, no, it feels weird because you're just so of this world. You have TikTok brain. That's why
You
it's
have
awkward.
technology brain. You can't do
Technology
anything
brain, yeah.
without having something.
No stimulants.
Yes.
It's like you've seen the videos of there'll be like a podcast clip, and then underneath is like Subway Surfers gameplay, or like GTA gameplay. Have you seen those?
Yeah, so you can listen and watch at the
Yeah,
same
so it's
time.
just like super ultra stimulating. It's like Then you go to church and it's quiet, and it's like, oh, what the
And you
heck?
can't
I
focus.
need stuff. I need like music. I need all this stuff. It's like, no, dude, you just
Well, okay, to
to
be
be off your
fair,
phone.
I am that way in the sense of it is hard for me to listen at church when I'm not drawing or doodling in some way. And so I calm my mind by busying my hands. So like my mom always told me, twiddle your thumbs. Like I literally will. Like if I am being impatient about something or whatever, I will twiddle
but in
or
all
twiddle
honesty, like
or
that's
do this.
That's you're not like focusing on like moving your thumbs compared to like
No,
if
I'm
you're,
focused
if you're
on
watching
hearing,
like a
but instead of getting antsy, I'm doing something to make me
Yeah.
not antsy.
but I'm talking like where you can't even focus on what's going on, like you're just like your mind is
bored.
all over the place, or you constantly need this is why I don't like some of the churches with instruments. Like the instruments are just always playing, there's just always sound, there's always stuff going on. And this is a whole
Well, and
nother
that goes
topic.
into your reverence too.
Yes.
That was the word I was looking for earlier when I was talking about a cappella. Is I love instruments, but there's just no reverence. There's more reverence in singing with your voices and your hearts because you're doing it as one big group. And if you don't do it together, it's not good.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so you have
There is something to be said for
you
that.
have to be
I
doing
would
it as
agree.
a group, and you have to commit. So
Yeah. Well, I think we touched on everything for wisdom.
I think we kind of went
off.
off a
little
little
bit,
bit. We
but-
kind of we're pretty good at
What is a Zoomer perspective without turning the corner and seeing it a little
What's
bit
a Zoomer
differently?
perspective about droning on about random things because our minds go on to it?
Random.
Not necessarily
I think-
random.
I
they
think
they
all
were
these
kind
things
of
tie in
They
quite a
tie
bit.
in, but I think we still. Jax
Zoomer-
and I are still new to this,
Yes.
and so we are
the
trying.
perspective was like a door, and then as we looked at the door,
We opened
actually
the door.
it, and then there was a different perspective, but it
Yeah, and there's
was
other.
the same building. It was just the interior. Yeah.
We're trying to reel in our thoughts and not kind of stray off and just talk about randomness and try to keep it making sense throughout
Also
each episode.
Part of the podcast is just, our personalities, our perspective
Yeah.
on on these topics, and hopefully
We're just hoping
guys
you
as a
get
viewer,
something
you were
out
able
of
to
it.
track
Yeah.
sort
we
of.
hope you can follow.
Because all of these things, I really do believe that.
I mean, ultimately,
It's-
that's what we wanted to do is just sit down and have a conversation.
yeah,
And
I
our
would
goal
agree.
in it is to help those of you out there that have no faith in our generation to
Yeah.
think, or those of you that are a part of our generation and don't think to
Maybe you
think.
start thinking a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's not only older folks that are saying these things. There's plenty of us that are young and still believe these things, and that just because something is old does not mean it is past, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that goes into tradition versus like a fad. Like tradition is good and something to look at because it is timeless. It's lasts every single generation, excuse me, instead of like a fad where that only lasted for one generation for a little bit, and now people don't want to do it anymore. But what I was gonna say is, because of this like worldly wisdom and how it's just kind of seeped into everything, all this stuff ties in together with the way the church is starting to look, and then just also the way society is looking. All this ties into having that godly foundation, and how I mean, and without making jokes about perspective too much, but it really does change your perspective when you have that godly foundation.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
and you,
exactly.
I mean, you can see the worldly wisdom seeping into different things because
Yeah, there's, in conclusion, how do we find wisdom? And it is putting God first in your life in general,
And
building the
asking for it.
foundation on God.
Yes.
And
You have to
asking
ask God for that wisdom. Yeah.
and discernment and understanding of where that wisdom is coming
Absolutely.
from. And I think ultimately that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree. So, hope you guys enjoyed our first
In person.
episode.
It was fun.
I agree.
I do enjoy it being close face to face.
It's different. It's a little bit like
No, but there's something in being in person and like actually here. Like people say joke or no, people believe in like aura and stuff, but like seriously,
Aura.
like there is something in like
based Christian aura.
well,
right-
no, but
right
there's
here,
there's
right there.
emotions and like people
Oh yeah,
seep into other people. Like
that's not even crazy. That's
that's an actual thing. Like it's not a conspiracy or a theory or whatever, or like some gypsy thing about aura or whatnot. But like seriously, if somebody comes in with a seriously bad mood, it's gonna ruin your day.
That's fair.
And so, us actually being in person, we can work off
It's
of
different.
each
Yeah,
other.
like you can.
Yeah, and so that's where it goes back to what we said in this podcast.
It's like going to church in person.
Going to
Yes,
church in
yeah,
person
for sure.
means so much more. And so I just
Hope you guys
do
can
it.
feel it.
Please
feel,
do. Go
feel the energy.
feel it, you know?
Feel the energy from this episode compared to the other ones.
Yeah.
something.
And we'll try to do this as much as we can,
Yes.
but it's hard. You know, we live
in different states.
far away. Yeah. And so, but yeah.
So, yeah, one thing I'll call you, the listener, to do.
Ooh, we're going to give them a challenge. Challenge time.
Is to pray for that wisdom, pray for discernment.
Absolutely.
And, it comes from reading your Bible, but Jake and I, we aren't super like big readers, either one of us.
Yeah, I do fail at that portion.
Praying for that wisdom and discernment, you can still get it from listening to other Christians, having conversations with other Christians.
I think conversation is a very important
and
part
listening.
of that.
I mean, you can listen to the Bible, but when
It
you
is
pray for it, you
important,
can
yes.
God will like give that to you in different ways. So,
But you still have to know it.
yes, yeah,
At
that isn't to
least a
say like, oh,
basic
you
form,
don't
yeah.
need the Bible. No, I would never say that.
Yes. Yeah.
But I would really encourage you to
Absolutely.
be praying for that wisdom and discernment. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. That we're not going to say what it's going to be about because last time we did that, we changed.
I think we've done that
Topic.
twice. Yeah.
Yeah, so no more, learn from your mistakes.
Cool.
Sweet.
Well, sweet. Again, just like in every episode, if you guys have any comments or any topics you would like to share with us, if you're on YouTube, obviously leave it in the comment section. But if you're listening on any podcast platform, in the description, there's an email, the zoomerperspectiveshow@gmail.com. Or you can text us if that link is there as well, and it will send it to us through an app, and we can read the feeds. So
Yes.
please
which
give us
would
some
be high.
feedback. We'd love to know. We know it's still pretty fresh, so there's not many of
Exactly,
you out
yeah.
there, but
But if you've been listening a lot and you've noticed something, like, we would both really appreciate it
Yeah.
hearing from you guys.
absolutely,
So,
it doesn't matter what it is. We want feedback. We want to know.
something super random and off topic would be hilarious.
Yeah, but we want to kind of know what we're making come to your mind by you listening.
Yeah.
Like, what are we making you think of? What is your perspective on something? And please share our show because
Because we want to do this.
we want
a lot.
to. We do. We want to continue to do this, but
This is really fun.
we're not just doing this for ourselves. We really want to reach.
Yes, we would like to share our perspective because
Absolutely.
I agreed with what Jacob said earlier with like how a lot of people don't have faith in our generation, and a lot of people in our generation like might be like a little lost.
Yeah.
And God, a lot of people don't look towards God as they should. So hopefully we can help you look at it a little bit differently, see the implications more than just on Sunday morning.
Yeah. So please pass it on. We understand that we are still new to this and we are slowly improving as we go.
Real.
But that does not mean that what we say is not
not
important. It does
based.
not matter how,
Yeah.
the performance of the show. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the content that matters. And I think our content is
Pretty sweet.
pretty
and
solid.
epic.
That might be a biased opinion, but
Just a little bit.
maybe.
So we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
See
it.
you
No,
guys.
we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye-bye. See you later. Goodbye. Why are you still listening? I said bye.